The future of Canadian food is strong, and FCC is ready to help the next generation of innovators like you with financing tailored to your needs and resources to help you keep growing. To get started, visit fcc.ca/youngfarmer. Thanks to our show sponsors, the Wheat School, Profitable Practices, and MNP. Rooted in agriculture, MNP Ag Advisors combine field-level agronomic knowledge with financial and operational insight to help farm businesses make confident decisions. From the field to long-term growth planning, MNP turns insight into action. Learn more at mnp.ca.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Agronomists. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, and I am absolutely glad to see each and every one of you in the chat. I feel like I need one of those mirrors from like Romper Room. And I see Jason, and I see Warren, and I see all my friends. Okay, it is, here we are. March. I am so pleased. Happy to be done with February. I'm still going to say March came in like a lion because it was minus 20 something here this morning. It is going to turn around this week, but let us know where you are, what it's looking like, except for Kevin, who apparently has daffodils already on the west side of the country, and I'm jealous. I'll be honest. Okay, quick reminder, if you collect those CU credits, let us know you watched the show, and do that by going to realagriculture.com/agronomists. Let us know you watched the show. We'll get you those CU credits, and while you're there, sign up for the newsletter. It goes out every Wednesday. It has the week's episode of The Agronomist, as well as a few relevant stories as well. So it's free. Check it out. Sign up. Tonight's topic is, killing those tough to kill weeds, how weeds adapt, herbicide resistant weeds. I had like 10 different ideas for it. All of that is to say, I knew who I wanted to have this conversation with, and so let's bring them in now. Because we've got Tammy Jones, now with Paterson Crane. Yeah, hi. And Jenny Ray Seward with Cronkhite Ag. First time on the show. One of those long-time watchers, listeners, first-time caller, first-time guest. Welcome here both.
Oh, it's great to be
Thank
here.
you, Lyndsey.
Okay, Jenny Ray, let's start with you. Tell us about where you're from, what's keeping you busy these days, what's your specialty at Cronkhite Ag?
Thanks, Lyndsey. So I run an independent agriculture agronomy consulting company based out of Foremost, Alberta. So we're right in the southeast corner of Alberta. A lot of people ask where that is, and I say, well, try to picture the desert, and that's where we are. That's where we farm.
Okay.
And it's funny you ask what my specialty is. I was talking to one of our elected officials here last spring, and he asked me, he said, oh, you do agronomy, do you specialize in anything? And I kind of looked at him and I said, drought. That's an answer. We've had a tough go of it the last 10 years. So certainly kochia is one of those things that gets a lot of airplay for us. And I don't know if you can see my t-shirt, but this is how we roll with a nice kochia tumbleweed on there. That's we have a club. So anyway, I've been fortunate to do what I do for the last, I turned 10 years last year with my company. Nice. So it's been great working with producers locally in this little corner of the world.
Mm-hmm. Congrats. I think that is an excellent answer to the question of what do you specialize in? Drought. Doesn't mean we want it, but sometimes you got to get good at a couple things. So there you go. As Jason Vogt says at a Southern Manitoba, so like Brooks, just add water. Sometimes mm-hmm. There is some, but just not usually. Tammy, catch us up. It's been a little while since you've been on the show. What's keeping you busy these days?
Gosh, that's a great question. Moving. I have recently relocated back to the booming metropolis of Nepinka, Manitoba, and I'm now working as a sales agronomist in Maletta, Manitoba, also a huge town. Back to the farm, back to somewhat drier conditions. So have been living in Carmen area up until now. and have been, relatively luscious with the Red River Valley very close by and
Right.
all the fun weeds that are in that area. Now I'm going to come back
Mm-hmm.
to southwestern Manitoba, which can be a little bit
Mm-hmm.
drier, although a Manitoba drought and an Alberta drought are not the same thing. But here I
Very
am
different.
back into an agronomy role, and off we go.
I'm excited about it. Wonderful. Now, when we were prepping for this episode, and I asked both of you, send a headshot for promo and bio, those sorts of things, the things we ask guests. And Tammy, you have the distinction of having spotted multi-resistant wild oats in Manitoba.
Oh, yes. Yeah. That's
Yes.
how old I am, right?
Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah.
I could do some really cool names dropping here for the older folks. When I went to university at the University of Manitoba back in the 90s,
Mhm.
there, Ian Morrison was my advisor when I was doing my master's, and I spent a lot of time in the Swan River type region. I won't say exactly where, hanging out with what we knew was Group 1 resistant wild oat, but that we also confirmed was Group 2 and other, which was Madivan at the time,
Ooh,
which, if you're into like sniffing markers, kind of that
mhm.
smell,
Okay.
only more intense. But
Mm.
yeah, multiple herbicide resistant wild oats, first in Canada to be able to officially confirm that. And I think that's one of the real, like, we knew they were around for a while, but official confirmation of herbicide resistance takes some time. It's a slow process. And that's why when we talk about herbicide resistant weeds, like, we're a couple of years behind what farmers already know, right? Always far
Yeah.
behind them. Yeah,
Yeah. Um, well, maybe what farmers suspect, right? And maybe
sure.
don't want to know. Maybe don't want to know officially, because I mean, one mode of action. So resistance to one mode of action is bad enough, but you've still potentially got options. We now are dealing with several weed species with multiple modes of action that they're resistant to. Jenny Ray, I'll go to you on that. I mean, you mentioned kochia. It is, especially in those drier regions, such a terrible weed, but I think just anywhere in Western Canada it is. What other? And we're going to spend quite a bit of time on it, so I do want to touch on just briefly what are some of the other very troublesome weeds that you would deal in your corner of Alberta?
So I would say definitely to touch on Tammy's point to wild oats. They're becoming more and more of a problem where the same old isn't cutting it anymore. So I would say definitely wild oats are on the radar. We've been noticing the past few years a little bit of problems, maybe more population pressure from stinkweed. So that one is kind of has been on my radar and maybe looking at could this be some group 2 resistance in here. It's been one, and then I would say lamb's quarters is one that's kind of
Mm.
where has that come from lately. We're seeing
Yeah.
quite a presence of lamb's quarters going, hey, we don't have lamb's quarters here, but we have it
Hmm.
here. And
Yeah,
so
you
that
do.
one,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, has been.
Yeah.
And I would say also we've sent some samples to Charles Geddes and Lethbridge over, it was a few years ago on Russian thistle. Russian thistle has kind of been one of those ones that's been creeping along with kochia that, hey, what's going on here? Do we have some different modes of resistance here that we assume that we don't. So that one is a definite player in our area as well.
Mhm. So tonight, one of the things we're going to talk about and sort of lay out is all the different layers of management strategy we have for the weed spectrum that we have, but especially with these herbicide-resistant ones, or potentially ones that may develop resistance, or how we sort of keep that at bay. Um, Tammy, I'll go to you though, because apparently you are just so aged. Which Wheat Pete says university in the
I
'90s
know, but
makes
he's
me
just
young.
kind.
But yeah, he is very kind and also quite gray. So there's that too. But let's back up just a little bit onto the how we got here, because I think that does play into some of the choices we now are making or continue to make, and we've got some great visuals too on things like tank mixing, etc. But if you can, on the like practice side, how did we sort of get to where we're at, where we are dealing with so many of these, not just glyphosate or herbicide resistant, but multi mode of action resistance?
You're okay, Pete. You'll
Yeah,
handle the gray, just like I'm
he'll,
handling it. It'll be
yeah,
fine.
he'll be fine.
Okay,
Yeah,
how did we get here? Wow, that's
yeah,
an amazing question. If we think about it, we've had 80 years to make this happen, right? 45-ish was about when we started to really think that herbicides were cool and really leaned into that sort of scenario. And what we did is use them and use them and use them and use them and use them without really thinking about the consequences of it. And so if we go back to, I don't know, the 90s, 80s, 90s, right? We were just starting to think about herbicide resistance, starting to wonder what was happening, why we were getting these escapes, and didn't really think that it would be the herbicide. It had to be something else, and blamed lots of other things. And it took a lot of intense scrutiny to come up with that, yeah, we were absolutely looking at herbicide resistance. And a lot of the reason why we're here is because of that sequential selection pressure, right? But there's a couple of other things that are layered in with it. So sure, we have a lot of sequential selection with the same herbicide or the same mode of action over and over and over again. But at the same time, we've got these weeds that are absolutely desperate to survive. And some of them are more diverse, right? They've got a whole community. They like to outcross. They've got pollen flow. They've got all sorts of different things happening. And those are typically the weeds that we see having the most success at surviving because they've got that genetic diversity. I call it hybrid vigor, but most people don't call it that in weeds. That's a
we have livestock.
cow
Yeah,
thing. Yeah.
yeah,
All right. So, but that hybridity is really helping them to survive. And so if we look at something like a water hemp, then absolutely, we know that we've got so much more seed that's set. We know, I'm going to throw in the word fecundity because there's a John Hurd out there who hates that word. He calls it fecundicity for me. But when you have something that is very prolific at setting seed and that's got a lot of genetic diversity, and then you throw herbicides at it over and over and over again, it's going to win. It just does. Wild oats are actually a disappointment to me. They're typically selfing. They have low seed set. They tend to be in patches because they shatter out. And so there's no reason why they should be the problem weed that they are, and yet they continue to be a problem weed as well. So, I mean, we know that each weed has its own set of attributes that help it to survive, and we seem to not to be able to adapt to the weeds. They are adapting to us and winning.
mm-hmm.
Is that in short strokes where you wanted to go there?
Yeah, yeah, no, it's excellent in that. Although Mark has a question, were there resistant weeds back when the only weed killer was steel?
Yeah, of course there were, right? Like if we go back, it was barnyard grass, right? That's the beautiful example that everyone talks about is rice, barnyard grass, hand weeding. What happened? We selected for ones that looked exactly like rice so that they would survive. No matter what we do, it's going to adapt and it seems conquer. But let's maybe hope that doesn't happen.
Right. So, and Jenny Ray, this is, I guess, it's a fascinating then look at for you who's been working in an area that has struggled with drought and extreme dryness for year upon year. We know that there's lots of different ways that exactly that weeds adapt, and you're going to see different species thrive in dry conditions, and you're going to see different crops thrive. So what have you seen even in just the 10 years as far as how the weed spectrum has adapted under dry conditions?
And that's been, yeah, I would say the kochia and Russian thistle have really cashed in, I guess, if you would say, due to, I've got, some pictures that are come up later of the lack of crop competition. And so, they're going to do everything in their power to, take over us on our weakest link, if we were to talk about it like that. So that's been a real struggle. We are in lentil country, I would say. And so that tiny little crop, I mean, we don't have a lot of crop competition, and there's a lack of products we can use overall that that work for us in crop. Yeah, so here's a picture of last year's 2025 durum crop, where we received late rains. It was too late to do anything for our cereal crops, but the weeds flourished, and so that's pretty much solid Russian thistle and kochia in the crop there that just made a mess. And so you've got the seed bank there that's waiting to get a little bit of moisture and that sunshine, and away it went. And so I would say those two, the last number of years, more and more people are saying, "Hey, is anyone paying attention to Russian thistle, because it's as much a problem on my fields as kochia, but kochia seems to kind of get all the airplay, if you will." And so those two are ones that just kind of take over versus the usual ones that we're looking for, right? But the crop competition, those two in our area really seem to dominate for sure.
Mm-hmm. And so this is it's as good a time as any to start bringing in like some of these, and we're going to talk about actual herbicides we're going to use and the right timing, those sorts of things. But we have other layers of practices of management, and one of them is crop competition, and having something there to actually use what moisture and nutrients are there, canopy, shade things out, etc. But Jenny Ray, when I look at this, I mean, I feel like the cereal didn't even have a chance. Like it tried super hard, but it did not have a chance.
And
Like,
that was
yeah.
that was the unfortunate part for sure, Lyndsey. Is we did everything right. This grower, he sent his seed away for the full fungal analysis on the seed test, 1,000 kernel weight, germ, everything, and he did everything right, and he actually seeded a little bit heavier on the rate than what we normally would have, hoping, because things did look really dry last year going in. We had a number of growers we were seeding the end of March last year, the last week of March, because it looked so dry, and we thought, well, better late than never kind of thing. So it was one of those that, yeah, we did everything right, but Mother Nature just came in a little too late last year.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, on the same topic of crop competition, because it is a huge thing that we could do, can we go, Producer Jay, to, I think it's Tammy's slide 2. It's a red root pigweed bouquet next to
that's
a
one plant.
stalk. Yeah, right? But it looks like a bouquet, Tammy. So
Fair
tell me the
point.
story
Okay.
of this. Yeah.
Well, okay, before we go here, I just want to say that I love the comment that Jenny Ray made about how he increased his seeding rate to try and really take advantage of that and enhance that crop competition. And the other thing I want to say is kochia and that goosefoot family, they just are so lucky. They've got a great root system. And so that's why things like kochia and Russian thistle do so well even in the dry. Not that they're really great at water use efficiency, but they will suck that soil dry of any moisture and then outcompete the durum for anything that's there. So it's just totally unfair. Kosha's just got it made in that. Okay. So this is one of the pigweeds. It could be green pigweed. It could be red root pigweed. Meh. I don't really care which one. The one on the left, the bouquet, as you call it, is just outside of some of the crop competition, right? And so it flourished, and that's where you can see the true genetic potential of what you can get from that type of one of the amaranthus plants, right? Lots of seed production there. On the right, that's one that was in the crop, right? Where the crop was competing. And so to Wheat Pete's point about crop competition being one of the main things that we really need to lean into when we're trying to manage any weed, whether it's herbicide resistant or not, is having that great crop competition. And so whether that's a pre-seed, an in-crop, seeding rates, whatever it is, throw it all at it to make sure, because you can see that the amount of seed that you set when you have crop competition is way less than what you'll get from the ones that do have that ability to flourish and show their full potential.
It is pretty remarkable to see, like, it's the same type of plant, and this is how different the growth characteristics can be. Like, that's
And so this is
wild.
the same thing with kochia, right?
Yeah.
The ones on the left, I guess maybe that's one of the reasons why I took this picture in the first place, is because it did resemble so much what a kochia plant does when it
Yeah.
doesn't have any crop competition, and how it just becomes this caragana bush or whatever you want to call it. And then, yeah, the ones that actually where the crop gets ahead, you see such a major impact on that weed growth then, which is great.
Which is, but it's also a key point of the good fight that we are fighting, is that we've got to adapt our management. The weeds are going to adapt to that too. So it's trying to stack the deck in our favor. Okay, let's go to producer Jay. We're going to go to our first clip with Dr. Charles Geddes. He's of course done tons of work on our herbicide resistant kochia and issues. So producer Jay, if you would, we'll go to our canola school with Charles Geddes.
Overall, big picture weed control in Western Canada, this is another tool that potentially is not going to work in the toolbox. How many tools do we have left?
Well, so the toolbox is shrinking for at least tools that we've had in history. I mean, there's a lot of innovation happening in the industry, right, as far as new ways to manage herbicide-resistant weeds. So we're trying to grow the toolbox as much as possible and sort of combat this reduction as far as reduced herbicides that we have to manage some of these resistant weed species, right? One of the big issues about this particular biotype, the Group 14 resistant kochia, is that many farmers, in response to glyphosate resistance, which is now widespread in kochia, in response to that type of resistance, many farmers have been adding this Group 14 into their pre-plant burn down for kochia management, right? But what that is doing is taking selection pressure off of glyphosate and applying it to the Group 14. So we're seeing there is quite a bit of selection pressure out there for this type of resistance, which is really why it's not too surprising that we are finding it now. So, okay.
Our sponsors tonight are MNP, the Wheat School, and Profitable Practices. Profitable Practices on Real Agriculture is a video series featuring Canadian producers who are adopting farm practices to have a positive impact on profit, people, and the planet. Profitable Practices is made possible by support from Farm Credit Canada and RBC Royal Bank. Find out more at realagriculture.com/profitable-practices.
So it's important to note that video is from 2023, I think so, right? That was the year. I know that because Kelvin looks like a baby. Anyway, no, just kidding. But I chose that one because not only is this a growing problem, of course, with Group 14 resistance, but I wanted to see, it's always nice to sort of pick something on, like, when we were just finding out about something and then sort of looking now, like, where are we at as far as Group 14 resistance or multi-resistance. Jenny Ray, I'll go to you first. What do you know you're dealing with specifically with kochia? What do you know you're dealing with as far as herbicide-resistant biotypes?
So yeah, that's an excellent question, because Charles's slide this past January on agronomy update was like, my left eye started to twitch, and you kind of go, oh, okay, this is it's escalating, right? And so it's one of those things. We've known Group 2 for a long time, and then we came in with the Group 9. We've got some Group 4s in there, and now we've got the Group 14s. And so that was really interesting to see Charles in that interview, because I remember when we had the confirmation of the Group 9 resistant kochia in this area, and we went, oh, okay, well, easy. We just, everybody started adding the 14s, and we really adopted that quickly. And then we really didn't think, 5 years out, 10 years out, about the selection pressure. What are we doing in that tank to those kochia that are there? So that's a really good reminder. And I think on Charles's slide this year, there was 7 of the actives within the 14s that are now have some sort of confirmation. And so it's like, oh, we're using all of those in our rotations.
Right.
And so that is something that is like, ding, ding, ding. Okay, there's no more easy button, because unfortunately, that's what the 14s became for us in this area.
Well, I think for a lot, right? For a lot of areas, it became a really good next option. And January, you bring up a really good point that the work does show that there are certain group 14s that you do need to know the difference, right? Because potentially a specific group 14 might still work for you or in your area. Or you may be one of those really lucky people that it doesn't, but there are differences between all the, right? So we
Yes.
do, like, it gets even more complicated because you need to drill down even further. Tammy, when you heard about the group 14 resistance in kochia, similar idea, like where did your brain start to work on, like, what are we going to do about this darn thing?
So I'm really fortunate in that I moved to an area where it's kind of a hot spot for kochia and specifically for this group 14. In fact,
You luck duck.
I know. So group 2, yeah, it's been around forever. Group 9, we blame Alberta for making that happen. Everyone
Sorry.
does. And then the railway brought it in. It's not like we got our own. Or no, we never did that, right?
No. Yeah.
Right. And then the group 4s, interestingly enough, are very similar to the group 14s in that you kind of need to know which one you have, because some of them still work and some of them don't. And you can do that with anything. And I mean, we did groups of herbicides because we were trying to keep it simple and make it more
That's right.
understandable, relatable as far as mode of action, how it's working. But we even know within the group 1s that you can have 2 different DIMs, for instance, one that's effective than one that's not. And Brian Jenks and the NDSU group have done a great job of characterizing some of that, right? So we know that we oversimplified things when we talked about the royal we, not me. It's not like I did any of this, but in general, when we were doing extension work and we oversimplified, we're just trying to make it easy. And so we need to be a lot more specific when we look at testing now and what modes of action we're using or what active ingredient we're using. The group 14s, they seem to have exploded in comparison to the group 4s, where yes, there's resistance there, but it doesn't seem to have built at the same speed as the group 14s have. And one of the things that, as an agronomist, you get a lot is, oh, well, that group doesn't work anymore. I'm just going to stop using it. And it's like, no. There's still value to any of those herbicides, right? So we need to think about mixtures and we need to think about bringing in some cultural control methods and stuff like that. But don't throw the baby out with the bathwater type of scenario. You still need that mode of action and you still need to use the full complement, even if you've got some of the population in your field that is resistant to that specific mode of action. It doesn't mean every weed is, and it doesn't mean that every biotype or any of the other weeds that are in there, the different, whether it's stinkweed or kochia or whatever, that they're going to be resistant. So you don't have a pure population of just resistant weed, and you need to think about how you're going to manage the whole field on a bigger scale instead of just, I'm abandoning that one group.
Now, the other part to me is we talk crop competition. Where we need to be exactly that, not maybe simplifying, but adding more complexity to our mixes.
Sorry, I was reading goats.
They're on to livestock in the chat. We're just going to ignore them for now. We'll get there because we are going to talk about potentially silaging kochia and other herbicide weeds. So we'll get to the goats in a minute. But January, we in prepping for this, we sort of, we list some of the things. Crop competition is one of them. When I think about herbicides and what Tammy's talked about with all the mixes, I also think about, okay, timing with our herbicides, right? Are we going to do more fall, or are we going to use residuals? But that, and we can come back to that, because the one other point is, what about the crop itself? Does moving to more fall seeded options help or hinder this whole plan? I preface all of that with, you have to have moisture. So I will apologize in advance that, right, fall seeding maybe is great if you got fall moisture, but maybe isn't. But Jenny, from that perspective, how does, looking at our crop rotation and potentially adding a fall seeded crop in there work in this scenario as well?
I love that question, because I do love a fall seeded crop. And it's funny you should say that. Last year, a lot of winter wheat went into very dry ground, and we're hoping that it pulls through this spring, but that remains to be seen. But crop competition, it goes back to that old agronomic saying is, winter annual crops breed winter annual weed problems. Summer annual crops breed summer annual weed problems. So, looking at field by field on your farm, what's the worst weed on a piece of ground? Maybe it's time to start looking at winter wheat or a fall rye or something that we can get on that ground to get up and get growing early and compete with those weeds as they're coming up, or get a head start on them. And it has been one of those ones that in the past number of years, guys have started to throw some winter wheat back in, and we're seeing more fall rye acres than we have in years past. And so it's nice to see, because those fields, when the growers harvest that crop, they're saying, oh, we got a handle on the kochia and Russian thistle. It wasn't an issue this year, and the stubble looks beautiful at the end of the year. So that is something I love seeing a winter annual, or a fall seeded crop go through there. Now, like I say, it'll be interesting in 2026 to see how our winter wheat does. But it's one of those ones, we got to do all the things right, because we're not necessarily going to be able to spray our way out of resistance, waiting for new products or new herbicides or groups to come out for us. We have to do the heavy lifting on a lot of these things.
Mm-hmm. Wheat Pete says it's wheat, it will be fine. I'm not as confident as Pete. As Tammy can probably attest, we really try, Pete, on the winter wheat side in the West. We do. It's just, yeah. Tammy, do you have thoughts and feelings about fall seeded crops?
I have so many thoughts and feelings about winter wheat, as well as many other things. But yeah, sometimes the lack of snow cover and the extreme cold, and this would have been a year where we had both of those things. Those fake springs that we have, where we start to pretend like
Yes.
maybe it's going to be spring and we're going to, get out of this unscathed. That usually screws up the wheat. We usually get then a nice ice layer. It really it wreaks havoc on winter wheat. And so it's lovely to think about winter wheat as being an opportunity. But just like winter canola has some struggles in Ontario, winter wheat in the West definitely has some struggles too. So it's we're not as blessed with the overwintering opportunities that we have in parts of Ontario. The other thing about winter wheat is exactly what Jenny Ray said, which is when you have winter wheat, then you start to see things like downy brome and Japanese brome come back in. And I know that downy brome is one of the ones that is a real problem in Alberta as well. And so we know that no matter what we do, the weeds are going to adapt and we're going to see some other challenge. Because of our annual crop rotation, kochia has really seemed to proliferate, at least in Western Canada, and then things like water hemp and Palmer amaranth into Manitoba, Ontario, and down in the States. Although kochia is doing a great job in the U.S. as well of developing resistance and being a pain in the butt too.
Right. Your friend Jason Vogt, your friend and mine, says is suggesting you refer to 2018 soybean fields northeast of Winkler, Vankler, and what you saw the next year when it went into wheat as the reduction in water hemp.
Yeah, so an
What is that
amazing
story? Hmm.
Amazing story. Okay,
Do
so
tell.
I was a bit
Okay.
of back in the day, not anymore, but back in the day, I was a bit of a jerk.
Mm,
And there was a soybean field where you couldn't tell that there were soybeans in some of the lower laying areas, and it
mm,
looked more like just a water hemp field with an occasional volunteer soybean in it. And so
okay.
37 acres was mowed down, which is a huge hit to any farmer, right? Out of this quarter
Yeah.
section 37 acres mowed down and absolutely destroyed. But when we went back into it next year to look for water hemp, they'd used a pre seed that was very effective and they had great crop competition. And the 37 acres that the year before had been solid water hemp with the occasional soybean in it was now a wheat field that where legitimately there was still some water hemp in it, but that crop competition, doing those right agronomic things, which were maybe costly at the time in the short term, but are
Okay.
probably going to reap rewards for decades to come because that seed set didn't happen, and so we didn't see a huge
Right.
disaster. It was great, yeah.
Hmm.
Phenomenal
Yeah.
turnaround, and yes, as Jason mentioned, it was a beans on bean rotation that they had been doing up
Right.
until, and so
Hmm.
that certainly does.
Yeah.
It was great to see a different crop in there for once. Crop
Hmm.
rotation, crazy.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Right. This super cool concept called crop rotation. Everybody.
Yeah,
There you go. Okay. Now, one other point. That we come back to and has been a bit of a theme this year when we've talked about like profitability and ROI on our dollars, etc. When we come back to very solid basic agronomy, one of the key things on herbicides, of course, is targeting weeds when they're small.
yeah.
And it will do the best job when they're little. And Jenny Ray's got, let's go with slide 1, because this shows a small kochia, but it also shows something else that kochia does that even though it's little, it can still be harder to kill. So walk us through when you're targeting kochia, that decision making process.
Yes, absolutely. So sizing, timing, reading the labels to know what product you're using at what time. Is it going to be effective? And here's a cool picture I took on the one of the very few days it rained last year on just kochia's ability to repel water. It's got a very hairy nature to the leaves. And so what are we using? Is that, herbicide? Are we using enough water volume? Do we need an adjuvant or an MSO with our products to help them stick to the plant better? And then I've got another picture. It's got some larger kochia. I can't remember what picture it was. Oh, there's a lovely tumbleweed that came up and
Nice.
hit my quad. Um, so it's just paying very close attention to, how big is the kochia in my field, or, weed XYZ that I'm concerned with. Reading my product label of the product, that I've got on farm. There it is. Yeah, there's some pretty big kochia that we had on a very slow to emerge canola field. And so that kochia there was approaching a pretty big size where, you know, is my is my glufosinate application going to take care of that, or should
Mhm.
I be looking at other things? And so that is something too. We really notice in our area a lot of times the outside rounds on fields will be particularly dirty. And so I've started chopping it up to guys, hey, would you consider, perhaps the higher rate of whatever product you're using? Maybe adding an adjuvant, adding something in there. Sometimes AMS will help. Or, and I always ask, and I usually get shut down, but increasing the water volume. A lot
You
of
are a
a lot
saint
of
to suggest it, but it doesn't mean they're gonna do it. But
lots
yeah,
of
you
times
gotta try.
the curse word comes back at me, but I have to
Mhm.
try. And sometimes it is just matching up. So my outside round is really dirty. Let's do 15 gallons in the high rate and something else. And then the rest of my field, I can spray at whatever I need to, right? And it's really matching that up because, the product labels are there for a reason and to help us make, decisions that we need to make, and making sure that we don't have to go back in and that those weeds don't produce seed at the end of the year, right? That's the main goal.
Mm-hmm. We had, and I brought this up last week when we talked about, green on brown spraying or targeted spraying applications. Same observation that for certain weed species, it's the outside rounds that are going to be far worse, right? For all sorts of reasons. Some weed species are going to act differently, but for many, it's those outside rounds that are going to be the worst. And so exactly that, you may want to target your headlands or those outside rounds somewhat differently. I want to pause here just briefly because Tammy's also got some sort of associated slides that sort of feed into this whole conversation, but we do need to. Let's go to our last read of the night, Producer Jay. I don't think we have enough time for the clip. So let's just go to the read and then we'll come back to our conversation.
Our sponsors tonight are Profitable Practices, MNP, and the Wheat School. From varietal advancements, protein and yield management, precision farming, and on to marketing, Real Agriculture's Wheat School is a video series that tackles every facet of the wheat growing season in an engaging and informative format. The Wheat School is made possible through C&M Seeds and Bayer Crop Science. Learn more at wheatschool.com.
Speak of the devil. I saw a wheat Pete in there. Okay. Okay. Producer Jay, can we go to, I think it's slide 3 of Tammy's, because this comes along sort of on the same idea of multiple modes of effective action, which I wrote down, Tammy, is MMO, MOIA. It's not a great acronym. We need to work on that one.
There's a huge debate about whether it's multiple modes of effective action or multiple effective modes of action. It doesn't matter if you go MOA or MOA, whatever. It's
whatever.
a whim away. There, does that help you out?
Okay.
There, now, there you go.
Does,
Yeah, good.
Writing it down.
So,
okay.
Mother Nature does not create straight lines. And this looks like on the left-hand side of the screen that you have an untreated check, and on the right-hand screen that you've sprayed. This is barley. With something, and that's not the case. The left hand is treated with glyphosate alone, and the right hand side is with a pre-seed herbicide in with glyphosate. So never glyphosate alone. That is always going to be one of my anthems. And Mother Nature doesn't create straight lines, so you know that you absolutely saw some effect from that pre-seed application. And this is just a layer. So it's a different way of herbicide layering. Some folks will use residual herbicides. Some will just use a pre-seed and then an in-crop or 2 passes of in-crop in order to try and get through some of these things. I think the problem or the challenge becomes is that there's not enough effective modes of action, and we need to start thinking about layering and everything. So I've got some wildly unpopular opinions that I'd love to talk about. So Lyndsey, you just said like the outside rounds are typically the most problematic, and they are until they're not, right? And it depends on the weed, whether it's going to be those. So there was one earlier about field horsetail or some of those scouring rush types where they've got that huge extensive root system, and so they do creep in from the ditch and come into the outside rounds. Sometimes the outside rounds are the dirtiest because you've brought something in from the last field that you were in that you couldn't control there, and now you've introduced it into the next field. And we've seen that with water hemp in Manitoba, where the outside rounds were absolutely the ones that initially were the dirtiest, but then sloughs and wherever else that it was really suited to is where it infested sooner. The other controversial thing that I'm going to say is, and don't kill me for this, people, but drone applications, which folks are starting to use more and more, even though there are very few pesticides that are registered for application with a drone. Regardless, farmers think that that's the best way to go to now control weeds because they can cover the area longer. But we've seen some really interesting research where wind patterns mean that we see our applications go all over
Yep.
and we are not hitting those target weeds. So if you're looking at a different way of putting a sublethal dose on a weed, congratulations, you've just found the coolest new way to do it with the coolest new toy. So water volume, you can't do it with a drone. Getting it effectively on that target weed, you can't do it with a drone. So if you love your drone, fly it, but use a real sprayer when you're trying to kill weeds.
This
I'm
is
waiting for all the hate.
Yeah, well, no, and I mean, hey, bring it. Because like one of the things that I learned about drones very early on that I was surprised by, and a lot of people I think don't realize this. Now we are now just starting to see drones big enough that actually have some sort of that prop wash that goes straight down. People think that
Yep.
drones do, but they don't, and especially not the ones that we have on the market. So you're exactly right. That spray deposition just can get carried by the wind. It doesn't have the same effect as a sprayer or even a helicopter or a plane. It's not the same thing. We're only now getting to ones big enough. And we actually had Dr. Jason DeVoe on not that long ago on Real Agriculture talking exactly that just now this latest biggest spray drone is about the only one that is starting to have any sort of effectiveness on the spray side that they can really count on. So it's not to say that other ones haven't at some time been able to do it, but it has to be repeatable and we have to be able to trust that it's doing its job. So yes, now January, we have a request here from Mike Waldner about talking about the Weed It system for a second. And that we've talked about the Weed It system and green on brown. It does, like, this idea of targeted spraying does come up in herbicide resistance management. Have you been working with the targeted spraying? How are you working that into your fields that you're walking?
Yes, and that is something. So I've been working with a farm since they installed the Weed It system on their sprayer. Sorry, in 2018, and so when they first put it on, I thought, I don't know, are we setting ourselves up, for a mess here? Are we going to miss, all of those things? But I thought, hey, let's just see how we go here. And I have been impressed with the efficiency that having that machine or that setup on the machine has done for us. And I mean, you can go and you can look at herbicide savings is the big one, but what about water savings? What about, we're not putting something on the ground that we don't need? All of those things. And so sometimes I think as farmers, we don't often talk about time savings. What is our most precious commodity out there often is time. And so what the Weed It system can do, I have been impressed with. I have not seen a mess. I have not seen a wreck. There's been nothing that I can honestly say. The operators that are on it they live, breathe, do their due diligence for the research on how to make it work effectively. And I think that's a huge part of it. But it was interesting. They had a neighbor who did a little bit of chem follow. And so he said, would you guys come over and do some chem follow for me with your new system? I want to see how it works. And some of the kochia was getting, dinner plate-ish size. And it was interesting. They used, it was a 400 acre field, and they used 160 acres worth of product, and it worked phenomenally. And they only sprayed what they needed to, and it was beautiful. So that is something that I've been impressed with. Seeding and fall spraying, it has saved a lot of XYZ. So I've actually been, like I said at the beginning, I was cautiously optimistic. I wasn't really sure. I thought, okay, this could be the start of something bad. Maybe that's just my my goal, but no, it has been very, very good to see. So yeah, that's what I know about the Weed It.
Yeah, really. I mean, and so to catch all our Ontario listeners up, chem fallow. No, okay. Anyway, that's it's not really something we do in Ontario. Anyways, not to say it's never happened, but it's not really something we do. Also, Tammy referred to a slough earlier. You can, send me a message if you don't know what that is. It's just so nice to talk to some Westerners. I'm telling you. Anyway, okay. So, also there is some really great chats going on, everybody. But Tammy, you're in good company. Tom Wolfe was even less keen on spraying by drone on Tech Talk Tuesday last week. So you are in
You know
very
what?
good company. Yeah,
It's not that we're not going to get there.
we will.
What I
Yes.
fail to
Yeah.
understand is why are we spending so much money investing in a technology where we know the weeds are going to adapt to the herbicide application anyway? And why don't we
Yeah.
go back to what some of the folks were talking about earlier, which is things like steel or mowing or fun things like that that are going to help us to reduce that seed set? And hey, I already know how to use a mower. I don't know about you, but like it's
Yeah.
not rocket science, whereas drones almost are. So like, why not go back to some of the things that we can do? And I don't know if Jay wants to bring up my little picture of the
Yes.
buckwheat and the
I think it's
lamb's quarters and
uh,
whatever it is
slide
there.
4.
You spelled
Yeah.
slough wrong, Wheat Pete. That is not how you spell
Oh,
slough.
it's
Goodness. Okay,
SLOUGH. Yeah. Okay.
exactly. Okay, so mowing isn't perfect. It's not. But if you can see this, there is a wild
Yeah.
buckwheat that is a yellow foxtail. You can tell by the red stem and the tiny little bit of a foxtail head on it. And then it's lamb's quarters. They have been mowed, which is, not
Yeah.
perfect, but it significantly reduced our seed set. Jim, thank you for spelling slew
Thank
right.
you, Farmer Jim. He would
So
also Caragana. Anyway.
oh,
Okay.
very good.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
so,
Thank you.
and they keep talking about fence lines, and I'm like, when do those
What?
exist? Like, where do you
What are
get those
those?
these days? Yeah, right. Anyway, okay, so
Okay.
mowing is a great cultural control to get rid of patches, right? So if you've missed your pre-seed and you didn't get your in crop perfectly and you have some outrageous patches that you actually need to manage, mowing is one way to go. And if you can't get everything done perfectly prior to seed set. One of the really interesting things with kochia that I'm like, Sean Sharp is doing a ton of work out of
Mhm.
Saskatchewan on kochia, and I love some of the things that he's doing. And one of the things that we've done forever is mow up all or swath all our kochia and then burn it. And I'm wondering if maybe instead we just don't go in and mow those patches and have that physical mulch of the kochia itself
Mhm.
to prevent germination the next year, because he's saying that actually mulching or like a plastic mulch or a physical, crop
Yeah.
mulch will help suppress weed germination the next year. So instead of going out and fly by nighting it with a drone, why don't we start looking at some of these other ways of implementing technology that we already have to really work on impacting that weed germination? We know with water hemp as well, if we utilize cover crops, and Jenny Ray, I know that with water being so
Yeah.
short, maybe cover crops aren't the way to go, but maybe a physical mulch with some of the other material that's being produced by that kochia, instead of burning it off, if we use it to then be the detriment of our future
Mhm.
crops of kochia, that maybe we'll get somewhere.
Mhm. Jenny Ray, has anyone been trying even, strategic mowing? I know that like kochia can tend to hang out in saline areas or different things like that. So, is patch management either by mowing or other things like what does that look like where you are?
I would like to see the sales of mowers in our area probably in the last 5 years, because that has been something that we went, hey, wait a minute, what? Can't we just mow this down?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that has been something that we've been successful in, preventing that seed set, but also like Tammy was talking about, covering that ground, and that actually made me think of our area too, because we are on the drier, sandier side of things. Is I've noticed the growers who have adopted stripper headers out here, so we leave
Yep.
quite a bit of stubble, nearly all of it, on our cereal crops when we go through. I'm noticing out there as I'm out, soil sampling, looking at this crop that's laid over, we have this nice mulch layer that we're going in with a disc drill and seeding lentils into. And that layer of, last year's cereal stubble is really doing, it's doing us a huge favor. So all of those things. And then saline areas too. We've had a number of growers the past few years that have gone, okay, this corner of my field never produces. I'm going to quit, getting my sprayer stuck in it every year and, having to pull the drill out and putting seed and fertilizer down there every year to just grow kochia and even foxtail barley. And so we've had a few guys who have said, I'm just going to seed a nice salt tolerant forage blend, and I'm going to, square that corner of the field off and forget about it. And we've been lucky where we've gotten the rain at the right time. We've got some beautiful catches where, now we can quit messing around in that corner of the field. And, the grass and alfalfa that's come up in there has choked the kochia and Russian and foxtail barley out. So that's been one of those ones. Like Tammy said, maybe we don't need to reinvent the wheel, but maybe we just need to remember what the rest of the wheel looks like. And so, those have been some really good success stories for sure.
Mm-hmm. Mike shares, just don't bale the kochia unless you sell the bales to someone feeding it 100 miles away. Because then not in my backyard, right, Mike? Okay. Now, I mean, I think though, and Tammy, to that point, I mean, I know there have been people who thought, if we mow it or exactly that, we swath it, do you roll it up, do you burn it, do you, whatever. But, we see certainly, I mean, granted, in Ontario, we're dealing with more moisture, but like having rye growing in the fall, to outcompete, fleabane and these sorts of things, like it is really quite remarkable. I also just quickly would like to point out to everyone in the chat who has mentioned that sheep do an excellent job eating weeds. And if you put them out after your winter weed crop, it is true. They will eat the weeds. They don't know they're weeds. They're not that smart. They just eat what's in front of them. So there you go. I'd like to feel somewhat vindicated. Anyway, okay. I do want to point out, and Tammy, can you just explain this quickly? Because for those who maybe don't know this really cool thing about what plants do is, so you showed those teeny little plants because they had been mowed. What fascinates me about that picture is those little plants still tried to make seed, but just
That's their
smaller.
goal.
Yeah, it's so cool.
That's all they're doing is, okay, I know how much day length there still is. I know that it's now time to set seed, and that's my whole goal in life. If they were quitters, we would have killed them long ago with that first pass of herbicide, and we wouldn't have had to worry about it. The tenacity of weeds is the reason why there's still a problem. And there are a lot of tenacious folks on the line tonight, but they are not as tenacious as the weeds that we're talking about, right? And so it doesn't matter how clever we are or how creative we are, if we keep relying on the same thing over and over again, the weed's going to win. And even when we mix it up, they're still going to adapt to the point where we are going to have to figure out a new way to battle them.
But maybe it's by using some of the old ways and lots of them. What is it? Many, many tiny hammers.
Death by 1,000 cuts, whatever you want to say. There's lots of different analogies. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Jason would like to know, are sheep as smart as their owners or smarter? They share a brain, Jason. There's one collective brain, and you don't know who has it that day. So you just got to take care of them as best you can. And that's all there is to it. But I will say, and Tammy is a fellow livestock owner. Generally, I don't know if you have any. If you do, you can join our club. Ruminants do an amazing thing of eating plants.
Most of them.
Yeah.
But then like cows, like white cockle, for instance, it'll shoot right through a cow and still be viable.
Literally.
And they were talking about burning earlier. It's good for some, like kochia being papery and crap like that. It will usually destroy, but red root pigweed or those water hemp or wild oats, burning doesn't get hot enough.
Yeah. Jenny Ray, you brought up one point on seed destructors.
Yes, love them.
Yes. So, but again, so would love to know your thoughts on them, but they also, of course, they're only going to work if it's a weed that has seed when you're driving across with the combine. However, share, Generate your experience with using some sort of seed destructor at harvest.
So that's been my question for years is I would really, really like to see someone do it. Specifically, we talked earlier about wild oats. I would really like to see some of these machines go over fields where we can't get a hold of the wild oats, where they're escaping everything it seems we do. I would really, really like to see. I know there's some folks in Saskatchewan who have tweeted about it, and they say, oh, the fuel consumption's horrible, but right.
Yeah.
So I wish we could see some of that in our area. And I often wonder too, in our when we're harvesting whatever crop it is, the kochia with those seeds, how would they do? Because I mean that's the main player in this area, right? And so I would really love to see that in our area, because that's been something. And we have had some of our guys around here who've had some wild oat problems, who have cattle friend neighbors who need some silage. Take that crop off for silage. Take those wild oats off, before they make seed, before they set seed, and that's been a way to help manage the wild oat problem. But yeah, the seed mills, I'm like, can someone please try? I would love to see that.
Head on down.
So,
Tammy?
Absolutely.
I have to jump in on this one. So I'm going to
Yes.
put a couple of shots in here as well. So Brianne Tideman at Lacombe was doing a shit ton of good work on that, pardon my French. And the
Yes.
way that the government is making decisions is really aggravating me, as far as how we help our future farmers with combating some of our issues. So there's that shot in there. But to your point, Jenny Ray, I think in your area with some of the drier conditions, that it's very feasible to make something like a seed mill work. Now, if you get into Wheat Pete's area, or Lyndsey, you or I, when we get into the wetter areas where we have a lot of green material, then getting those seeds to get into the seed mill to get crushed and get actually destroyed becomes a lot more of a challenge. And so I think that there's, again, a lot of obstacles to overcome, but I do know that Australia has had a huge amount of success with it. And I know that Brianne was able to get red root pigweed seeds destroyed. Like, she could annihilate a lot of things with a seed mill. So I know if you've got dry material and you get that chaff to go through the seed mill, you can do a great job. And sure, it reduces your horsepower a little bit, but it helped. It's another way to minimize the amount of seed that's actually getting used. But yeah, in some of the more challenging areas where it's wetter and we have more green material, then those seed destructors become a little bit less effective, from what I understand.
Yeah. Farmer Jim says that the problem is with the destroyers is they aren't worth a nickel when you trade, which generally means buy one used. Apparently they're worth nothing. And maybe Farmer Jim has one for sale and it's going to be super cheap. So there you go. I can put you in touch if you want to talk to Farmer Jim. He's not that far. He's at Lancer in Saskatchewan. And Dave would like to know, Tammy, is it a metric?
It's metric. Absolutely.
It's metric.
Yeah.
We are Canadian.
Yeah.
It's metric.
We're Canadian,
absolutely.
eh? Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
that's right. It's metric, obviously. Okay. We're going to end it there. Thank you both so much. This was a lot of fun when it could have been very depressing and very twitchy of the eye, as Jenny Ray pointed out, because this is an incredibly difficult topic. But we have ideas, we have creativity, we have old school, we have new school, we have tech, we have sheep, we have everything. So let's use it all and let's see what problems we can solve. So Tammy, Jenny Ray, thank you so much. Also, Jim says, not me, but I know a guy. Of course he does. Okay. Jim, I'll text you later. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night. We'll see you next week right here on The Agronomists. Cheers, everybody.
Thanks so much.